My name is Ben, and I'm going to be talking to you guys today about building modular applications with Angular. Building applications that scale, which basically means we'd like to remain sane as our apps get big. So Angular is fun for prototyping, but we'd like to build things that stand the test of time and don't turn into this disgusting mess of gross code as we build. So a quick summary of me. I'm very proud of this graphic. You may recognize it. So I've not actually been coding for all that long. I'm 21 years old. I have, this may be a little bit rounded, but 190 GitHub repositories. I write a lot of open source code. Is anyone here younger than me, by the way? Okay, fun stuff. So as the intro said before, I write for Node. I do a little bit of Angular stuff as well. I maintain a ton of stuff out there. Good chance people in the room are using something that I've written. But I think the important thing to think about is the fact that I'm not brilliant. I don't have a degree in computer science. I've been doing this seriously for 2 years. I think I've just found a really, really good workflow for building things and building them quickly. And that's what makes the difference. So let's talk about what I do. So we're going to break this up into 3 pieces. Why you need a module loader. And then we're going to intro Browserify, which is the module loader that I'm recommending. And then we're going to talk about why small composable modules. Why is that important? Why are they the future? So number 1, why do I need a module loader? We're going to start with a quick straw poll here. How many people, when you start an Angular application, you go to angularjs.org, and you click the download button, and you copy Angular, drag and drop in the Finder to your project? No hands. Good. We're starting from a good point. How many people use Bower? How many people say Bower install Angular? Okay, so this looks like the majority of the room, Bower installs Angular to start your project. And so we're going to start off by talking about Bower. And we're going to talk about what it does, what it helps with, what it gets us over angularjs.org download, but where it also falls short and where we're looking for something better. So Bower is a package manager for the client side. So it's a little bit different than other things that we're going to be talking about. It's focusing on a lot of things. So you might grab Bootstrap and its styles and all kinds of things from Bower. It tries to cover everything. It's basically just parsing Git repositories. So it's handling semantic versioning and grabbing tags. We'll talk about semantic versioning quickly in a second. And it's going to try to help us by downloading dependencies. So quick primer on semantic versioning. This is really the thing that Bower is doing for us that's better than just straight up downloading things off of the web. I say, give me Angular at tilde 1.3.13. The tilde means give me all the patch versions. So Bower instead says, OK, the latest is 1.3.15. We're going to install that for you instead because you said we should allow that. A lot easier than keeping things up to date manually. And then we get into dependencies, and Bower starts to get a little bit shakier. So unfortunately, Bower has one mode, and that's vomit all of our problems onto the user. And if you've ever used Bower, that little CLI output should be familiar. Someone wants one version of underscore, someone wants another, and Bower just says, what do I do here? And that's not really very helpful because I don't know what to do here. I don't know why one guy wants 1.4 and one guy wants 1.6. I really just want my code to run, even if it means having 2 versions of underscore. Not compatible with Bower's way of doing things. Because in real applications, we're not just Bower installing Angular. That's simple. That's easy. Bower's OK for that. But we have dependency graphs, not just flat dependencies, we have graphs. So that means we have our app, and then we have A, B, and C, which we depend on. And A, B, and C probably depend on a few things of their own. And so we get this crazy graph of dependencies. The bigger our application gets, the bigger the graph gets. And that's totally OK. That's how you build big applications, is you rely on good foundations. We're relying on the fact that browsers work a certain way. We're relying on the fact that Unix works a certain way. And so we want to implement that same sort of sense in JavaScript, where when I need to sort an array by a child property of every object in it, like, I know I'm just going to go get sort on and do that. Problem solved. See, Bower's not very good at that, though. Bower takes this big dependency graph that we've created, and Bower gives us this. Bower just says, here's A through H. This is what you asked for. I just put it all in one big directory for you. And, I mean, it's better than nothing. It's better than going and grabbing everything manually. But it hasn't really helped us all that much, because it's put all this stuff in one folder, and it pretty much just says, good luck. And it leaves us holding the phone. Like, what are we supposed to do with this enormous folder of lots of JavaScript? Everything probably has the script nested down in some folder. Who knows what the file names are? Like, it's really not done much for us. As our applications get bigger, Bower's taking care of like 10% of our dependency problem and really left us with basically all the rest. And what we do to deal with those dependencies, Bower's installed them. We have a Bower components folder, or whatever you'd like to name it. We just create script tags for everything. And every controller, every service, every piece of your Angular application, all dependencies, we just have to create script tags. And we're going to end up with any halfway sizable application, we're going to end up with 50 script tags in our giant index.html file. And that's gross, really gross. And so as I say that, you're looking at me. You've got this sort of thing going on, because you're saying, I don't do that, Ben, come on. I don't use script tags, I use gulp concat. I have this awesome grunt file, you should see it. I use so many cool gulp plugins. I've got it all taken care of. Stop talking about script tags. No one's actually doing that. But of course, if we actually look at it, we concatenate all of our files and just take everything and smush it into one file. That's not really solving the problem. I mean, it's not as slow as taking 20 script tags and just asking the browser to do all the work. But it's not really solving the problem of scaling our application, making development easier. It's making the user experience a hair better, but we're still in the same situation of every time we install something, we have to add a new script tag. We have to put it in the right place. We have to figure out, is everything that wanted this below it? It's complicated. No matter how smart you are, you're not going to figure it out. This is 2005 style web development, if that, and it's time to move on. Script tags are fun and they're easy, but that's not how we build applications anymore. So just summing up this chunk, talking about Bower, talking about what's out there now, what most people are using Angular-wise now, and why it's not good enough. So first of all, we want to build our applications without manually specifying every single script tag in order. And that's a big one. That's the number one thing we want. Number two is we want dependencies without conflict vomit. So when two things conflict, I just want our package manager to deal with it. I don't want it to ask me. I don't want it to stop, because most of the time I have no clue why there's a conflict. I may need to investigate it later. So yes, we don't want Angular 1.2 and 1.3 in the same application. That makes no sense. But we're going to find that in unit testing. We're going to find that in all kinds of other places. So for the 99% of other cases where conflicts are actually not a problem at all, we just want the package manager to deal with that. And when I say my package wants a particular version, when you install my package, you should just get that version. No questions asked. And lastly, as of probably about 6:30 this morning, there's 146,330 packages on NPM. NPM is by far the fastest growing package manager of any language, any framework. And it would be really nice to use those. There's a ton of really, really high quality stuff there, and we want to take advantage of it. So let's talk about Browserify. There are other tools that fulfill this. I'm going to be talking about Browserify. Webpack is another one. The point here is that you pick up something, not that Browserify is the end-all be-all. So what is Browserify doing? Browserify understands the require method, the algorithm that it uses in Node.js, and it's going to traverse through all of your scripts, find every single thing that's required at any level of depth, and it's going to build that into a single bundle that runs in the browser. It does all kinds of other crazy things, including shimming certain bits of Node that work with the file system and work with arguments. It's quite comprehensive. So this is an example of what you can do with Browserify and Angular as of 1.3.14. Angular is a good Browserify citizen. So you can see what we're doing here is requiring Angular instead of assuming that it's available as window.angular. Then we're calling angular.module the way that we always do. That's no different. And then the weird part is this bit where we have an array, where normally we put in the names of our dependencies, except here we're putting in requires. And this works. And let's look at why it works. So if we look at node modules, Angular resource, index.js, which is the main file for Angular resource, you can see two lines. Line number one, we require Angular resource, and this is just the regular old non-module aware Angular resource. It registers the module globally. This is the angular.module with the array argument, so creating a module. Now that that's available, we export from this module the string ng resource. So if we skip back, what you can see is actually happening is within one function call, you're getting the module registered for you, and you're getting the name back. And so why is this so important? We never repeat ourselves here. This code entirely describes every dependency that it has. As long as these are installed, so they appear in your package.json, all that's doing is specifying which version. Browserify is able to build this. So at no point have we repeated Angular. At no point have we repeated the idea that we depend on Angular resource. Single source of truth makes it way harder to make mistakes. And in a simplified case, this is all you do to build it. So Browserify is actually running on Node, but you don't need to be an experienced Node developer to work with it. So you're running Browserify-E for the entry file, app.js, and then we're using the greater than operator. This is just Unix right here. And we're piping that out to dis/app.js. Browserify has a great streaming API, and so if you want to pair it with gulp, go for it. If you want to just use it in your NPM scripts, everything will work. So we've solved one problem here, which is we want to build our apps without manually specifying every script. Browserify does all of the work for us. We don't think about any of the challenges here. It builds up our dependency graph. We move on. And then we have this awesome thing where we can go grab close to 150,000 modules from NPM. So I have a little example here where you could create a nice dog names application. That's a package that's available on NPM. It will give you a random dog name. And we can just save both of those. It'll be included in our package.json, and we're all set. We can go build. So we've solved our problem of access to great packages. Bower has some nice things for the front end, but NPM is really a package manager for a professional developer. You're going to find the things that you need to solve the real code problems that you need, as opposed to just a handful of popular things like Bootstrap. And last is the middle item that we didn't cover, which is Bower's issue of dependency vomit. And this is a little bit harder, but Node, or rather NPM, deals with it quite nicely. So Node modules is nested, unlike Bower, which is completely flat. And so we're looking at here just an example of an application. And this application just has one dependency, and that dependency is Angular credit cards, which is a package that I wrote. And Angular credit cards is also a Node module. So Angular credit cards has two direct dependencies. It has AP, which is a little utility for doing partial function application. And then it has credit cards, which is a tool for basically doing parsing, validation, and formatting of credit card numbers, which we'll actually talk about later. Credit cards is a Node module. Credit cards depends on camel case for doing string camel casing. It depends on credit card types for doing type-specific credit card transformation, and it depends on fast LUN for running the LUN algorithm against your card numbers. This is actually just a subset of what would really happen if you installed Angular credit cards. There's even more. And the thing is, you don't have to care about any of this. NPM installs all of this stuff automatically for you, and if you want to traverse through your file system and go look at this stuff, awesome. You should figure out how it works. It's all very smart. But if you don't care, require Angular credit cards, and everything else happens magically. So we've solved that problem. Dependencies, no conflict vomit. And so lastly, we have a good chunk of time to talk about this. I want to spend a little bit of time on why, sort of philosophically, this stuff is so important, and why it's not just the details here. This is genuinely the most important thing that's happening in JavaScript right now, and if you're stuck on Bower and gulp concat, you are really missing out on some big things. So I'm going to suggest something that's a little weird for an Angular conference. It's a little unusual to hear somebody get up on stage and say, I want everybody in this room to make it a goal to use less Angular. And what do I mean by that? I'm going to talk about this in the context of a particular example here. Angular payments, jQuery.payment, Angular credit cards. You can take a guess at which one my preference lies with, because I wrote the last one. But we're going to talk about why it's important that I wrote it that way, and why it's important that you think about writing your applications this way. So we'll actually start in the middle with jQuery.payment. jQuery.payment, as the name belies, is a jQuery-dependent library for doing credit card formatting, validation, all kinds of things. And it's actually written by Stripe, some really smart engineers from Stripe. And so that's why I think you have to understand this stuff is new, and that JavaScript is finally getting serious. So the fact that someone did it wrong a few years ago doesn't mean they're stupid. It doesn't mean I think that they're bad engineers. It just means that we have good tools now and we have to use them. So jQuery.payment mixes jQuery in with the credit card logic. So validating a credit card is just a string and returning a Boolean. Nothing to do with the DOM, except jQuery.payment mixes all that stuff together. So if we want to use jQuery.payment within Angular, we need jQuery, and that's like an extra at least 100 kilobytes worth of dependency weight. The whole point of using Angular is that we don't need to use jQuery for 99.9% of our applications, so that basically prevents us from using it. So we move on, and we find Angular payments. And this is where I found myself a year plus ago looking at Angular payments and saying, man, there's no tests here, not one single unit test. The repository is largely abandoned, so it hasn't had commits in months, and there's a ton of outstanding issues, and those issues actually suggest bugs, like they're active and serious bugs. And at the time, I was building a company donations for nonprofits, focusing heavily on the user experience of a donation, and said, I can't use this. It's just, it would be wrong to give this to my customers. This is a terrible experience. I'm not just being sort of haughty about code quality. I genuinely think this is a liability for a business. So I went and wrote Angular credit cards. But Angular credit cards is a little different than the two above it. Angular credit cards does not have one single line of code that knows anything about how a credit card number works. Not one. No business logic. Angular credit cards is a set of directives, and those directives call through to the credit cards library that we talked about before, and the credit cards library does all the work for us. It does the parsing, it does the validation, it does the formatting, it handles years and months, everything. Except that's not even entirely true. Credit cards itself actually depends on credit cards types, which does specific things like figuring out if a particular number is a Visa card, or taking a string of 16 digits and turning it into the nice 4x4 set of groups that you can use to put spaces in between and make things look like a real credit card so that users can enter stuff easily. So what I wrote for Angular actually has nothing to do with credit cards. It's really just lightweight bindings on top of a library, and that library is totally generic. So what does that mean in the real world? Like, what happens? Tilt is using credit cards for their application, which who knows how many millions, if not tens of millions, they're processing at this point. And they're using React. Like, I haven't really spent much time with React, but they have no problem adopting my code because it's a node module, because maybe they even use Webpack instead of Browserify, but it's consistent, it follows the standard, and so they get to require it and have no idea what goes on internally. People are using it with Ember. You can use it in any sort of setup you want. And so that gets us to a sort of concluding thought here, which is our goal as developers, especially JavaScript developers, where the ecosystem is so hot, the churn is so heavy. We need to build things that are awesome standalone. And then, second, once we've got the core vanilla JS API awesome, then we go integrate it into Angular and React. And there's no other way. And this is Nico, who works with me on Karma Browserify. This idea is pretty powerful. It seems simple, but it's extremely important. It's really unacceptable for us to be getting pissed off at each other because somebody uses React and somebody uses Angular. It's the silliest thing ever. I mean, we just talked about people are going underground into mines thousands of feet deep, and like we're sitting in a coffee shop typing away on our laptop, and yet like the level of vitriol that comes with all these tools and whose is best and which one is the most performant and which one will be the future is just absurd. And the way to combat that is this. You build things that are awesome, you integrate them with those tools, and then you move on. What we need to be doing is solving problems, releasing them as well-formatted node modules, and then just move on. Credit cards plus credit cards types has, I don't know, between the two of them, like 90 unit tests. That's a pretty important part of applications. It deserves 90 unit tests, but like this was not something that I was ever doing as a full-time job. Open source has always been a hobby for me, and yet I managed to make time for it because it's well separated. I spend some time on support, but I write it, I write tests, I document it, we move on. Angular 2 is going to be a big leap. We're going to have all kinds of big leaps as developers, and the way to make those leaps smaller and to make them more manageable and to make them easier on our teams and ultimately deliver better products for customers is to break these problems down into smaller bits such that we only deal with the hard stuff. We deal with the DOM manipulation. We deal with figuring out new ways to compose our user interfaces and to compose async operations, but not squabble over who has the best payments library for their framework or who has the best integration with some tool. So to wrap things up, we need to use Browserify because Bower is just not giving us enough. It's not that Bower was written by people who didn't know what they're doing. It's not that Bower isn't useful for certain cases, but Bower is just built for an era of web development that has come and gone. We're building serious applications with JavaScript, not little dinky web apps with a couple of dynamic features, and we need a real package manager to do that. Browserify is a very good tool for working with the best package manager out there, NPM. You can do all kinds of crazy things with it. I write a ton of stuff, almost 100% at this point, in ES6 these days, and it's compiled by Babel, which has a totally easy-to-use integration for Browserify. You basically add one line, and you're off and running writing ES6. This stuff is surprisingly easy, and what I want you to take from this is not that this is cool or it's interesting or it's the future, but that you're going to go try this tonight, and then you're going to take an application that you've already written that you're struggling with maintaining, and you're going to go port it. over to Browserify. And I shouldn't even say port, because that makes it seem like it's hard. It's not that hard. Once you pick a module structure and you start writing your code and not just doing a bunch of script tags, all the other stuff doesn't matter. The folder structure, all these silly style guides, forget about it. Those things really don't matter enough for you to pay attention to them. What matters is that you have a system, and this is the system that modern JS has settled on, and it's going to help you be more productive. So that wraps things up for me. This is how you can find me, Twitter, @BenDrucker. I know we're going to be going into lunch at this point, so I would not begrudge you at all if you'd rather go eat instead of talk to me about build systems. So if you want to go grab something, you can feel free to tweet at me if you have a question, and we'll make sure to sync up at some point. Just left the company that I've been running for 2 years. If you want to read about that on my website, if you want to look at an absurd number of JavaScript packages for everything from testing to credit cards, I'm on GitHub. Thank you.